my heavens, it's a pool of mud. If we get into it, we'll all get muddy. Who are professionals? Professionals are people who have knowledge and who have experience. Often professionals are certified as professionals. They could be doctors, lawyers, accountants, bankers, architects, engineers, you name it. It could be a professional. Now, in a sense, we are all professionals who are privileged, because when you compare our numbers with the total population, it's a relatively small number. That's why I call it privilege. So, privileged people in particular, we have responsibility to society. We're fortunate that we've had the opportunity to study, to learn, to certify ourselves. I look back on my own education. I went to a government school and taxpayer paid for my education. And I'm so thankful for it, for the opportunity that I had. So sometimes it's the system that has provided for us. Sometimes it may be personal wealth. Whichever way, we have responsibilities. Now, my real question is why professionals are needed in public service and in politics. Professionals are needed. If you take a look at the Sri Lankan Parliament, we have presently 225. We had much less if you go 40, 50 years of elected representatives. And among them, professionals are very, very few. In Asian context, people who come into politics normally have come in through the family tree. It's an Asian politics. Sri Lanka is not very different. And then a few outsiders have come. They've generally been businessmen or people who are self-employed. You can be a doctor practicing or a lawyer practicing. And even very, very few have come from the corporate sector. Now, when you come from the corporate sector, you also bring value. So we have very, very, very few professionals. Now, if you think of the country, in a sense, as a corporate, and I'm not using that word in terms of business or profits and losses only, but if you think of the country in a corporate sense, then that knowledge, those skills, those experience are needed. So the first principle always I would say is you should be people of ethics and high integrity. That goes without saying, but that's the first principle. The second is education. Education is needed. It may be formal education, maybe university degrees, it may be professional qualifications, or some kind of vocational qualification. It's needed. Third important principle, I would say, you need experience. You can go to university and maybe you have never worked, right? And there's a huge gap between just having knowledge and actually having experience, because taking a policy and actually implementing it is two different things. Lots of theoreticians can come with policy, but professionals are needed, not only in policy formulation, but they are needed also in implementation. So professionals have kept away from politics for too long. They've kept away from politics and they have their reasons. Often the reasons are, my heavens, it's a pool of mud. If we get into it, we'll all get muddy. I remember hearing those stories, you see, when I was invited into politics and contemplating whether to go. And there is only half truth in that. Yes, it's a pool of mud. That doesn't mean that you have to get muddy. So we meet in our business circles, we meet in our professional groups, we meet at cocktail parties, we chat. We generally talk about all the problems in the country, but the issue is about the solutions in the country. So we stay out. Because of those reasons I said, you just stay out. I remember the first time a phone call came through and said a private sector person is going to run for mayor of Colombo. They formed an advisory committee. My name came into the advisory committee. I, blasted the person who called me by saying, why did you call me? Who gave my number? I don't know the person running. I would admit that was a little bit of my private sector arrogance. And that's how I reacted immediately. But the person was about 15 years older than me. I was in my 30s. He calmed me down. He got me to his office. He was the chairman of a Sri Lankan company. He sat me down and he told me, Eran, you need to be involved. Then I asked him, why were you involved? You are 15 years older than me. you're chairman of a company. Then he told me, no, Eran, I have observed you, though you're just a very young banker, and I think you need to be involved, and also you have some people skills, you speak the Sinhala language, the English language, you need to be involved. Cutting a long story short, I got involved. And then after a while, when that mayor of Colombo was going into parliament, I was called and told, you're going to be the next mayor of Colombo. Now I went home, said this story to my wife. She looked at me, and as I said it, she said, just one word. She said, Pisuda. That's what she said. You see, so it's not just we have that problem, in our families and in our spouses also. It's a commonly held thing. My heavens, don't have anything to do with politics. This is really a bad, muddy pool. Don't get anywhere near it. Then after I got involved as an advisor behind the scenes, one day I was advising a minister. About 2 years after I had started, he looked at me one day, a little annoyed. And he said, Eran, we've been working together for a while, but Eran, you haven't still understood something. I said, what have I not understood? He said, you haven't understood that this system works for those who are already in it. What he didn't tell me is the people there in politics, right? Obviously there are exceptions, but lots of people there in politics, the system works for them. Who cares about the citizen? That's exactly what he was saying. That day I went home, and my mind got open when I went home. Suddenly, it was like a revelation. If you want to change something, you have to get involved. That's really what he was saying to me. I can know the problem, I can be critical of it, individually and collectively, but what he was saying is you need to change the system, you need to get involved in it. So, professionals, you can get involved as a part of a civil society organization. You can get involved, working in the private sector, certainly. And those are very, very valid involvements, no question about it. But some of you need to be involved by getting into the political system. Because unless you get into the political system, you can't bring the internal change that is needed. 2 or 3 people can't change it. You need a critical number there. Political parties don't matter. You see, people ask me why I joined a particular party. I said we had to go from A to B. And I was at the bus halt. Yellow bus came, red bus came, blue bus came, green bus came. None of the buses were perfect. But I was trying to figure out to get to A to B and which bus would I feel most comfortable with. And I got into one of them. So the political party is not the important thing. The important thing is your involvement. And get involved with the group that your personal philosophy is closest to. But what do you bring into it? You bring ethics and integrity as a professional, and then you bring your education, and you bring your experience. This is very, very critical. So if you look at the Sri Lankan Parliament on one hand, and then you have the executive arm of government, right? Then the president, the cabinet, the other ministers, and the executive arm of government. They take executive decisions, right? And when they take these executive decisions, right, a lot of them who are empowered to take the decisions sometimes don't have the education and don't have the experience. Experience is very, very little. We can complain, but it's not going to change anything. But if you are involved, then it changes everything. So we have case studies even in Asia. I look at Asian countries. I'm not comparing ourselves to the West. I look at Japan and Korea, Hong Kong, Singapore, and these Asian countries. And we have cultural links as well with some of these Asian countries. Similar religious and cultural backgrounds. But they have succeeded. And I must admit, we have failed, relatively speaking. So, if you are going to change it, we have to get involved. You have to get involved. Without getting involved, you can't change it. So, at the apex of the executive, they make executive decisions, right? Maybe policy and the conversion of the policy. Macroeconomy is one area. Health, education, agriculture, information technology, digitalization, you name it, industry, environment. They are making decisions at the peak without really having the knowledge. This is why we need to change this. What did some of those countries do? They actually approach the people like I was approached in that phone call to be an advisor and said, we want to come, get you to come and serve. This is what I would do in the future. This is what I would encourage leaders to do in the future. What we should do is, we should look at people in industry, in the private sector, in civil society, ethical, educated, experienced people. And we should tell them, why don't you give 5 years of your life, come and become a public representative? And we invite them to come. Some of these countries is exactly what they did. And then they went one step further. When they realized that they need a particular minister, they often went and looked for the person with those qualifications, people with the experience, often CEOs of companies or holding very high positions in senior management. And they said, you come in for a while and serve for 5 years. You become the minister for 5 years. You are needed here. You belong to an organization. You run a company, or you own a company, or you're on the board of directors, right? And I'm not looking down on anybody, but certainly we all know that the qualifications to be the security guard in the company and the CEO in the company are two different sets of qualifications and experience. We all know that. I don't go and make my person with the security guard background CEO of the company. That's what we are doing in politics. Let's change it. Let's not complain. We have to get involved. If we don't get involved, I think we don't even have the right to complain. Now, there are some barriers to entry, and I must say that. The barriers to entry is the system works for those in it. Therefore, don't think that you are very welcome. Now, when I say that, you may be wondering, my heavens, you are telling me to come and join and you are saying you are not very welcome. Yes, I have to tell you the truth. Because the system works for those in it. Some professionals are not always very welcome. Because if you come and if you do the right job, you're going to succeed. And the country is going to succeed. So politics is competitive, and therefore others may not necessarily like it. But the issue is this. It's not about you and me personally. It's not about you and me personally. It's about our society. And therefore I want you, these barriers to entry are there. Often political leaders, like in countries like Singapore, where they went and actually hand-pick public representatives. In Sri Lanka, they don't. Often people just come and ask, and therefore most of the time the wrong people are asking for the nominations, and they are giving it on the basis that they can win the election, rather than what is their integrity, what is their education, what is their experience, what is their skill sets that we need. They're not looking at it organizationally like that, but they need to look at it organizationally like that. I would like to finally say this. There's something my mother told me when I was very young. My mother said to me one day, Eran, you did not choose to be born in this country. You were born and then you were told this is Sri Lanka. Eran, you did not choose to be born to the Sinhala race. When you were growing up, you were told you were a Sinhalese. Eran, you did not even choose to be born to the Wickramaratne family. When you were growing up, you were told that your name is Wickramaratne. She said you did not choose your father. So those decisions were not made by you. But we live in a society where holding people responsible for their race, their caste, their religion, and their class. It's nothing to do with them. At birth, everybody is equal. This is what my mother was actually telling me. Everybody is equal. And then she said to me, therefore, there is no accident in you being born into this family and you being born into this society, into this country. That's what she said. I firmly hold on to those values. We haven't been born by accident. Right? We have responsibility to our families because many are leaving the country. And I'm just pausing here to say we have responsibility to our families. Not only that,
It's not by accident that we are born in a society. We have responsibility to our societies as well. So professionals, I'm speaking as one like you, right? Our responsibility certainly is to our family. We have responsibilities to our kids, and we want to do the best for them. But we have a larger responsibility to the society we live with. And I'm telling you, if a critical number of us actually step out into the political arena, this country's future will certainly change for the better.